A lonely farmer saved the Apache chief's son. The next day, the chief came with 20 maidens. Choose one. He lived at the edge of the frontier, far from towns and neighbors, on a land that stretched wide and wild under the open sky. His small wooden house stood on a hill, surrounded by fields of wheat, corn, and a few fruit trees. A narrow dirt path led to the main road, but hardly anyone ever walked it. Seasons came and went with steady rhythm, and he went about his work from sunrise to sunset, just him and the land. He had not always been alone. Once he had family, a wife and children who had brought laughter into his home, but fate had been cruel. Disease had swept through their small settlement, and one by one he had lost them. The house had grown quiet, the laughter had gone, and in the silence he had learned to live with his own thoughts. The animals, chickens, cows, a loyal old dog, were the only companions he had left. Still, he worked hard, tending the land, planting seeds, repairing fences, and doing everything necessary to survive. Life was simple and it was lonely, but it was life. Every morning he would rise before the sun, the cold air brushing against his face, and he would go outside to check on the crops and animals. The fields were large and wild at the edges, where grasses and weeds grew freely. Sometimes he would wander into the hills surrounding his land, checking for signs of wild animals or damage to the fences. It was during one of these walks that he first saw the boy. At first, the movement among the tall grass seemed like the wind playing tricks. Then he noticed a small figure lying face down, unmoving. He hurried over, calling out, but the boy did not respond. His heart beat faster. He was cautious. He knew that the lands around him were often crossed by travelers and sometimes people who were not friendly. Yet he could not leave the child there. The boy's clothing was torn, his face streaked with dirt, and he shivered as if chilled to the bone. The farmer knelt beside him, gently lifting his head. The boy's eyes fluttered open, clouded with fear and confusion. "Are you hurt?" the farmer asked softly, not wanting to startle him. The boy only nodded faintly. He spoke little English, and the farmer knew he must be from a tribe nearby. He did not need to know the exact words to understand the urgency. Without hesitation, the farmer scooped the boy into his arms. He carried him to the house, speaking quietly to calm him. The boy's small body was weak, trembling from exhaustion and perhaps hunger. The farmer laid him on a bed he had prepared, covering him with a warm blanket. He poured water into a bowl and helped the boy drink, making sure not to frighten him. Though he was wary of what might happen if the boy's family discovered him here, the farmer's heart would not allow him to turn the child away. He tended the boy's wounds as best he could. There were scrapes on his arms and legs and a deep cut on his forehead. The farmer cleaned each carefully, using water and cloths, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "You are safe now," he said. "No one will hurt you here." The boy's eyes were wide with uncertainty, but slowly he relaxed, leaning into the warmth of the blanket. Night came, and with it silence. The farmer kept watch, sitting by the fire with his rifle across his lap. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and the distant hills hid shadows that might be dangerous. He listened for the sound of horses or voices, fearing that someone would come looking for the boy. But no one appeared. Still, he could not sleep. He thought of the boy's family, of the possible anger or worry they must feel. Yet he knew that kindness had led him to this choice. He had saved the boy, and he would do so again if he had to. During the night, the boy whispered questions in his language, pointing to his wounds or the food. The farmer answered as best he could, using gestures and gentle tones. He offered bread and milk, which the boy accepted hesitantly at first, then more eagerly. Slowly, the fear in the boy's eyes began to fade, replaced by curiosity and trust. For the first time in many years, the farmer felt a new kind of connection, one that reminded him of the family he had lost. By morning, the boy was stronger. His eyes shone with energy and he moved more freely. The farmer prepared breakfast, simple as it was, and watched the boy eat. Outside, the sun rose over the fields, painting everything in gold. The boy laughed softly when the farmer made a funny face, and for a moment, the loneliness that had weighed on the farmer for years seemed to lift. He realized that even in a life shaped by solitude, moments of connection could bring unexpected joy. The boy looked out the window at the wide fields and hills. He seemed restless, wanting to return to his people, and the farmer knew he could not keep him. Despite the safety and warmth he offered, the boy's home was elsewhere. The farmer helped him gather his belongings, small as they were, and guided him toward the edge of the property. They did not speak much. Words were limited, but understanding passed between them. The farmer placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Be careful," he said. "Go home safely." The boy nodded, his eyes full of gratitude. Then, without a word, he ran toward the distant trees and hills, disappearing from view. The farmer watched him go, a mixture of relief and worry tugging at his heart. He returned to his house, closing the door behind him. The fields were quiet once more, and the old routine resumed. But the memory of the boy's trust lingered, and the farmer knew that his act of kindness had changed something, even if he did not yet understand how. Days passed, but the farmer could not stop thinking about the boy. Each evening, he would glance toward the hills, wondering if he would ever see him again. He continued his work, repairing fences, tending crops, and caring for his animals, but there was a new lightness in his step. He felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. Saving the boy had reminded him that even in a lonely life, choices mattered and small acts could have big consequences. He often thought about what might have happened if he had not helped. Perhaps the boy would have been found by strangers, lost in the wild, or worse. The thought made him shiver. Yet in that decision he found a deep, quiet satisfaction. He had acted not for reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, he felt a connection to life that he had not felt in years. The land around him remained wild and untamed, the horizon stretching endlessly. But the farmer no longer felt entirely alone. Somewhere out there, the boy he had saved carried a memory of kindness. Somewhere, a family he did not yet know was grateful. And the farmer, tending his fields under the rising sun, felt that perhaps even the loneliest lives could touch others in ways no one could predict. As the sun climbed higher, casting warmth over the fields, the farmer returned to his chores with renewed determination. He repaired a fence, checked the animals, and planted seeds that would grow into food and life for the months ahead. Every task, no matter how small, felt important. He had faced fear and uncertainty, and his choice had made a difference. In that quiet, isolated life, a small but powerful change had taken place, one that would ripple far beyond the farm, touching lives in ways he could not yet see. Evenings became a time of reflection. Sitting by the fire, he would recall the boy's frightened eyes and the soft sounds of trust that had formed between them. He thought of what lay ahead, uncertain of what the future held, but certain that his actions had been right. The loneliness that once seemed endless was now tempered with hope, the knowledge that a single choice could shape destinies. In the solitude of his home, the farmer understood something fundamental. Kindness was not measured by wealth or power, but by courage and compassion. And even in the remote corners of the world, far from towns and neighbors, one person's choice could touch hearts and change lives forever. And so the farmer lived that day as he had every day before, alone, working the land, tending animals, watching the sun rise and set. But now with a quiet joy, a reminder that even in solitude, life could be full of meaning. He had saved a boy's life, and in doing so, he had begun to heal a part of his own. The world, he realized, was larger than his fields, and connection could be found in the most unexpected places. The morning after the farmer had saved the boy, life on the farm returned to its usual rhythm, yet everything felt subtly different. The fields glimmered with dew, the wind whispered through the tall grasses, and the farmer moved about his chores with a sense of alertness he had not felt in years. He worked carefully, checking fences, feeding the animals and inspecting his crops. But his mind was never far from the boy he had helped. He wondered about the boy's family. Who were they? Where did they live? Would they know that he had saved their son? These questions circled in his mind, restless and persistent. The farmer had lived so long in solitude that even small uncertainties felt significant, but the knowledge that he had done the right thing comforted him. He had acted from kindness, not fear or pride. That simple choice, he realized, had already changed the course of the boy's life, and perhaps his own as well. As the day progressed, he noticed movement at the edge of the field, shadows among the trees, and the distant sound of hooves on the dirt paths. His heart would leap each time, expecting trouble. He was aware that helping an Apache boy could bring danger. The tensions between settlers and tribes were well known, and misunderstandings could escalate quickly. Yet he reminded himself that fear could not dictate his actions. Compassion had guided him, and he had no reason to regret it. The boy himself seemed a constant presence in the farmer's thoughts. He remembered the small, trembling figure, the wide eyes that had watched him carefully, and the quiet trust that had grown as he tended the boy's wounds. That trust had been earned slowly, over careful words, gentle gestures, and the warmth of food and shelter. The farmer understood that trust was fragile and rare, especially between strangers from different worlds. But he had glimpsed it, and it had changed something deep within him. The morning passed slowly, and by noon the farmer had finished most of his work. He rested in the shade of an old oak tree, wiping sweat from his brow and letting the wind cool his face. He thought about what might happen next. The boy had returned to his tribe, as expected, but the farmer could not stop imagining the reactions of the boy's family. Perhaps they were angry that he had taken the child in, even briefly, or perhaps they were grateful in ways he could not yet know. Afternoon brought more work, as it always did. He repaired a broken fence post along the northern boundary, aware that wild animals sometimes ventured too close to the fields. While hammering the post, he noticed distant clouds moving across the horizon, shadows passing over the land. Every sound, every movement in the distance seemed heightened now. The farmer had become alert to the world in a way he had not been before. His instincts were sharper, his senses more aware. Saving the boy had awakened something in him that years of routine had dulled. As evening approached, the farmer prepared a simple dinner of bread, vegetables, and a little meat from the small herd he kept. He ate slowly, reflecting on the day, listening to the wind and the occasional call of a bird settling for the night. The farm, though quiet, seemed alive in a way it had never been before. The memories of the boy's frightened face and small hands touched something deep inside him. He had acted out of courage, yet he had also discovered a part of himself that had long been buried under years of solitude. Night fell, bringing a blanket of darkness over the land. The stars shone brightly in the clear sky, and the silence of the frontier wrapped around the farm like a protective cloak. The farmer sat by the fireplace, tending to a small flame that provided warmth and light. He thought about what might come next, aware that he had set in motion events he could not control. In the quiet, he wondered whether the boy's tribe would ever return or whether his actions would go unnoticed beyond that day. Sleep came fitfully. The farmer dreamed of the boy, seeing him wandering through forests and hills, lost and alone, then smiling as he found safety. He awoke several times during the night, heart racing at the sound of the wind or a distant animal. Even in rest, he was vigilant. The act of saving the boy had changed him, making him more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of each choice he made. The next morning, he rose before sunrise, as he always did, and went outside to inspect his fields. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of soil and grass. He noticed small signs of life, the dew glistening on leaves, a bird perched on a fence post, the faint tracks of animals in the soil. These simple details reminded him that the world was alive and full of opportunities for connection, if only one had the courage to act. Around mid-morning, while the farmer was mending a section of fence that had been damaged by wind, he saw movement in the distance. At first it was unclear, a flicker among the trees, a shadow that moved quickly. He paused, holding the tool in his hand, and squinted toward the horizon. His heart beat faster as the figures became clear, riders on horseback moving steadily toward his farm. The farmer's mind raced. He did not know whether they were friends or foes. Could it be the boy's family coming to thank him? Or were they angry, coming to demand answers or punish him for interfering? He stepped back, lowering his tool but keeping his eyes fixed on the approaching figures. He felt a mix of fear and anticipation, a tension that made every sound and movement sharper than usual. As the riders came closer, the farmer saw that they were a group of Apache men, riding with purpose and authority. At the front rode a man with a commanding presence, wearing the traditional garments of a chief. The farmer's pulse quickened. This was the boy's father. The moment felt heavy with uncertainty. He did not know whether he would be met with anger or gratitude, whether the chief would see him as a friend or an intruder. The chief dismounted and approached the farmer with calm dignity. His eyes were steady, observing the farm, the land, and the man who had dared to help his son. The farmer stood his ground, unsure of what to expect, but determined to remain honest and respectful. "I only did what I thought was right," he said quietly, aware that words could matter as much as actions in this delicate moment. The chief nodded slightly, a gesture that carried weight and meaning. There was a long pause, filled with the sounds of the wind and the faint rustling of trees. The tension in the air was almost tangible, but gradually the farmer noticed a subtle shift. The chief's expression softened, and the sharp edges of caution in his posture relaxed. It was clear that he understood the farmer's intentions. The chief spoke, not in anger but in a measured tone, explaining that his son had returned safely to the tribe and that the farmer's kindness had not gone unnoticed. He spoke of the dangers his son had faced and how the act of saving him had demonstrated bravery and compassion, qualities the tribe deeply valued. The farmer listened intently, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. He had acted without expectation, yet the acknowledgement of his actions carried profound significance. For the first time in many years, the farmer felt a sense of connection that went beyond the boundaries of his land. He realized that his simple choice had created a bridge between his world and that of the tribe. The fear and uncertainty that had accompanied his decision melted away, replaced by a quiet understanding that compassion could transcend boundaries, cultures, and distances. The day continued with conversation, gestures, and shared understanding. The chief made it clear that the farmer's actions had earned respect and gratitude. The farmer, in turn, expressed humility, explaining that he had only acted out of what seemed right in the moment. There was no pride in his words, only sincerity. The chief's response was measured, acknowledging both the act and the character behind it. As evening approached, the chief prepared to leave with his men, but he paused at the edge of the farm. "Remember," he said, "kindness has power. You have shown that today." With a nod, he mounted his horse and rode back toward the horizon, leaving the farmer standing in the fading light, contemplating the events of the day. The farmer returned to his home, carrying a sense of calm and fulfillment that had been missing for years. The farm seemed quieter, yet it was alive with possibility. The boy's trust, the chief's acknowledgement, and the knowledge that he had done something meaningful lingered in his mind. He realized that life, even in isolation, could be shaped by acts of courage and compassion. Night fell again and the farmer settled near the fire, reflecting on the extraordinary events that had unfolded. He thought about the boy, the chief, and the bond that had formed through a simple act of kindness. Sleep came easier that night, and dreams were gentler. For the first time in many years, the farmer felt a quiet peace, knowing that even the smallest choices could ripple outward, touching lives in ways one could never predict. In the days that followed, he continued his work, tending the land, repairing fences, and caring for his animals, but he did so with renewed purpose. The memory of the boy and the chief's visit remained vivid, a reminder that life was larger than solitude, and that connection and compassion could change not only the lives of others but also one's own. The farmer had learned an important truth: courage and kindness, even when risky or uncertain, could open doors that seemed impossible. And in that quiet, lonely farm at the edge of the frontier, a single choice had begun a story that would continue far beyond the boundaries of his fields. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting golden light across the farmer's fields. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint smell of earth and growing crops. The farmer had already begun his daily chores, feeding the animals and checking fences, yet there was a quiet tension in the air he could not explain. Something felt different. A sense of anticipation settled over him, though he could not say why. He had thought often of the boy he had saved. The memory of the small, frightened child remained with him, and the knowledge that he had helped someone in need gave him a quiet pride. But there was also a sense of uncertainty. The boy's father, the Apache chief, knew what had happened. Would he come? Would he be angry, or would he appreciate the farmer's actions? These questions swirled in the farmer's mind as he moved through the fields, repairing broken fences and checking on the crops. By mid-morning, the farmer noticed dust rising in the distance. At first he thought it might be the wind, but then he saw shapes moving among the clouds of dust: horses, riders, and the steady rhythm of hooves on the hard dirt. His heart began to beat faster. He stopped what he was doing and shaded his eyes with one hand to see more clearly. 20 riders were approaching, riding with purpose and confidence. The farmer's mind raced. Could it be the boy's family coming to thank him, or were they angry at him for taking the child into his care? He set down his tools and wiped the sweat from his forehead, preparing himself for whatever might come. He had acted out of kindness, but he knew that sometimes good intentions could be misunderstood. The riders drew closer, and the farmer could now see the figure at the front more clearly. The chief himself, tall, calm, and strong, riding a horse that moved with steady grace. The chief dismounted and walked slowly toward the farmer. Every step seemed deliberate, measured, and full of meaning. The farmer's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. He could not back away. He had nothing to hide, and he had acted with honesty and courage. When the chief finally reached him, they stood face to face, the tension in the air heavy yet not threatening. The chief's eyes were steady, observing, thoughtful, as though measuring the man before him. "Your actions have been heard," the chief said, his voice deep and calm, carrying the weight of authority. "You have saved my son." The words were simple, but they carried immense meaning. Relief washed over the farmer. The fear he had felt at the approaching riders melted away, replaced by gratitude and respect. He bowed slightly, feeling both humble and honored. "I only did what I thought was right," the farmer replied. His voice was quiet but firm. "No one should be left in danger, especially a child." The chief nodded, his expression softening slightly. It was clear that he understood the farmer's intentions. There was no anger in his gaze, only recognition. The farmer felt a wave of relief and pride. In that moment, he realized that kindness, even in a lonely life, could reach far beyond what one could see. The chief gestured for his men to dismount as well. They moved with ease and confidence, yet their eyes were watchful, as if trained to notice everything. The farmer stood aside to let them pass, feeling both nervous and curious. The chief approached closer and spoke again, explaining how the boy had returned safely to the tribe and how his actions had been witnessed and remembered. The farmer listened carefully, absorbing every word. He had acted without expectation, yet the acknowledgement of his deeds felt powerful. For the first time in many years, the farmer felt a connection to the world beyond his fields. He had lived in isolation for so long that human interaction often felt complicated. Yet now he understood that courage and kindness could create bonds between people, even those from different worlds. The chief's presence was commanding but calm, and the farmer sensed that trust and respect had begun to form. The chief invited the farmer to sit with him under a nearby tree, where the shade offered relief from the bright sun. They spoke slowly, using gestures and simple words where necessary, bridging the gap between language and understanding. The farmer learned a little more about the boy, his name, and the tribe's ways. The chief explained that in their culture, bravery and compassion were highly valued, and the farmer's actions had shown both. The farmer felt honored. He had never considered himself brave. He had only acted out of necessity and conscience. Yet here was a man of great authority acknowledging qualities he had not thought he possessed. As the conversation continued, the chief shared stories of the tribe's life in the nearby hills and plains. He spoke of hunting, gathering, and teaching children the ways of their people. The farmer listened intently, fascinated by the differences and similarities between their lives. Though their worlds were distinct, both relied on the land, animals, and community for survival. The farmer began to see that connection could exist even across boundaries that seemed vast. The chief then paused, studying the farmer carefully. "You risked your life to save mine," he said finally, gesturing to the boy's image in his mind. "Many would not have done what you did. This shows honor and it shows your heart." The farmer felt a warmth in his chest. It was rare for him to receive recognition, and even rarer from someone of such importance. He nodded humbly, grateful for the chief's words. The men of the tribe gathered around, observing quietly. Their presence was not intimidating. Rather, it was a demonstration of respect and solidarity. The farmer realized that he was witnessing a moment that transcended the ordinary. It was not merely about saving a child. It was about trust, respect, and the bonds that could form through simple, courageous acts. The chief smiled faintly. "My son is safe because of you," he continued. "This is not just my gratitude. It is the gratitude of our people." The farmer's mind filled with a sense of awe. The weight of his actions, the ripple effect they had created, became clear. A small choice, made quietly in the fields, had reached far beyond the boundaries of his farm. The day wore on, and the conversation moved from serious matters to lighter stories. The chief shared humorous incidents from his tribe, tales of mischief and learning among the children. The farmer found himself laughing for the first time in a long while. There was a sense of camaraderie forming, a connection that went beyond words and cultures. The boy's presence, though no longer physical, seemed to linger in their shared understanding. As evening approached, the chief and his men prepared to leave. The farmer felt a mix of relief and sadness. He had grown used to the presence of others, even briefly, and the thought of returning to solitude was bittersweet. Yet he understood that the chief's visit was not just a moment of gratitude. It was the beginning of a relationship built on trust and mutual respect. Before leaving, the chief turned to the farmer. "Remember," he said, "your actions matter. What you have done today will be remembered. My son will speak of you and our people will honor you. Courage and kindness have power. Never forget that." The farmer nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection and purpose. The words echoed in his mind long after the chief, and his men disappeared over the hills. The farmer returned to his house as the last light of day faded, carrying a sense of peace he had not felt in years. He tended the fire, prepared a simple meal, and reflected on the events that had unfolded. Saving the boy had been an act of instinct and conscience, yet it had brought him recognition, friendship, and a profound understanding of human connection. That night he lay in bed listening to the quiet of the farm. The wind rustled the trees, the animals settled into their pens, and the stars shone above. For the first time in many years, he felt part of something larger than himself. The land, the boy, the tribe, and even his own small life were connected in ways he could not fully understand, yet he sensed their importance deeply. Sleep came easily that night, filled with dreams of the boy running freely, smiling and laughing, and of the chief riding across the plains with dignity and calm. He dreamed of bridges being built between people, between worlds, and between hearts. He awoke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. Life was no longer just about surviving alone. It was about living with compassion, courage, and connection. In the days that followed, the farmer continued his work, tending the land and caring for his animals, but his heart was lighter. The memory of the chief's words, the boy's trust, and the quiet honor of doing what was right lingered with him. Each day he felt more certain that his small acts could make a difference, that kindness had the power to change lives, and that even in a lonely life, one could find connection and meaning. He thought often of the chief's words, "Courage and kindness have power." They resonated within him, guiding his actions and decisions. The farmer realized that his life, though simple, could carry significance beyond the fields he tilled and the fences he repaired. His choice to help the boy had opened a door into a world he had never imagined, and he knew that the story was far from over. And so, the farmer continued to live in the quiet of his fields, aware that the world was larger than his loneliness, and that trust, respect, and compassion could ripple outward in ways that would shape the lives of many, including his own. The sun rose gently over the fields, painting the farm with golden light. The farmer had already started his morning chores, tending to the animals and checking his crops. Though life on the farm was routine, his mind was restless. He could not stop thinking about the chief's visit, the boy he had saved, and the powerful words of gratitude that had been spoken. There was a sense in the air that something unexpected was about to happen, though he could not know what. By mid-morning, he saw dust rising again on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be travelers or traders passing through, but as he focused, he noticed the unmistakable rhythm of horses approaching. The farmer's heart began to beat faster. He had seen the chief ride away days before, but now there was a sense of purpose in the approach. 20 riders emerged from the hills, moving steadily, each riding with skill and confidence. At the front rode the chief, followed by a group of young women. Their presence was commanding, yet calm, and the farmer noticed the care with which they rode, their expressions serene but observant. The sight was breathtaking. The young women were dressed in traditional garments, carrying themselves with dignity and grace. The farmer's mind raced. He did not understand all of the customs, but he sensed that this was a significant and serious visit. The chief dismounted and approached him, motioning for the women to do the same. The farmer set down his tools, feeling both nervous and curious. The chief spoke first, his voice calm and firm, yet carrying a tone of deep respect. "You have shown bravery and kindness," he said. "Your actions toward my son have earned honor. We bring you a gift and a choice. Choose one from among these women and she will join you as family." The farmer was stunned. He had never imagined such an honor, nor the responsibility that came with it. His mind spun with questions. He had lived alone for years, accustomed to solitude and simplicity. How could he make such a choice? Each of the women had a presence that seemed to radiate respect, wisdom, and strength. He felt the weight of the chief's words, knowing that this was more than a gift. It was a symbol of trust, gratitude, and alliance. He looked at the women carefully. Some had soft eyes, some had quiet confidence, and others carried themselves with a gentle strength. Each one seemed aware of the importance of the moment, and yet none appeared to push or insist. The farmer realized that this was not a decision to be made lightly. It was about respect, understanding, and mutual consent. He had always approached life with thoughtfulness and care, and now that approach would guide him in this extraordinary moment. The chief waited patiently, understanding that the farmer needed time. He had brought the women not as an object of display, but as representatives of trust and gratitude. Each of them had grown up in the tribe, learning its customs, values, and ways of life. To choose among them was to acknowledge their individuality and their worth. The farmer's mind wandered as he thought of the responsibilities he would have if he accepted this gift. It was not just about companionship. It was about respect, partnership, and shared life. The farmer spoke slowly, carefully, addressing the chief first. "I am honored by your gift," he said, "but I cannot choose without understanding. I must know your ways, your customs, and what this choice truly means. I want to act with respect, not haste." The chief nodded, a smile crossing his face, showing approval for the farmer's thoughtfulness. "You speak wisely," the chief said. "Understanding and respect are more important than speed. Take time and act with heart." The farmer then turned to the young women. Though they had been quiet, they now looked at him with curiosity and patience. He spoke gently, using gestures and simple words to communicate his intentions. "I want to understand you, your lives, and your wishes," he said. "I do not want to choose blindly. I want to make a choice that honors you and your people." The women listened, their expressions calm and attentive, appreciating his sincerity. Over the next hours, the farmer learned more about each of the young women. He listened as the chief explained their skills, their roles in the tribe, and their personalities. One was known for her wisdom and gentle nature, another for her courage and skill in hunting, another for her kindness and care for the children of the tribe. Each story revealed a depth of character and strength, and the farmer realized the importance of choosing with understanding rather than appearance alone. The young women themselves began to speak through gestures and simple words. The farmer learned that they valued respect, honesty, and shared responsibility. They had been raised to contribute to their community, to act with care for others, and to maintain harmony with the land. The farmer felt a sense of awe. He had never been presented with such a choice, and he understood that it carried far more weight than he could have imagined. Time passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The farmer reflected on what he had learned. This choice was not simply about companionship. It was about partnership, mutual respect, and trust. He thought of the boy he had saved, the chief's words of gratitude, and the values that had guided him through life. He realized that the decision must honor not just the gift but the integrity of the people involved. The chief watched quietly, understanding that the farmer needed this time to reflect. There was no rush, and no pressure was applied. The young women waited patiently, their presence calm and respectful. The farmer felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that his actions would shape the lives of others as much as his own. He thought deeply, considering the qualities he valued, the responsibilities he could uphold, and the ways in which he could contribute to a life of shared purpose. Finally, the farmer stepped forward, feeling a quiet confidence in his choice. He spoke to the chief and the women, explaining that he had considered the values, skills, and character of each person, and that his choice was guided not by appearance but by respect and understanding. The women listened, nodding, understanding the sincerity of his words. The chief's face reflected approval and pride in the farmer's wisdom. The farmer extended his hand toward one of the women, chosen not for beauty alone, but for qualities that complemented his life and values. She stepped forward gracefully, acknowledging the honor and the responsibility she would share. The farmer and the woman exchanged a look of mutual respect and understanding. Though words were few, the connection was clear. They recognized that this was the beginning of a partnership built on shared values, trust, and care. The chief spoke again, praising the farmer's thoughtfulness. "You have acted with heart and wisdom," he said. "This choice honors your intentions and our people. May your life together be filled with respect, harmony, and purpose." The farmer felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had approached the moment with honesty, care, and courage, and the outcome reflected the values he held dear. As the day ended, the farmer welcomed the young woman into his home. Together, they walked through the fields, talking in simple words, gestures, and smiles. There was no rush, only a gentle understanding forming between them. The animals watched quietly, and the land seemed to accept this new connection, as if nature itself acknowledged the bond being formed. That evening, the farmer and the young woman sat by the fire, sharing a simple meal. The air was filled with warmth, and the quiet of the farm seemed richer than before. They spoke softly, learning about each other's lives, values, and hopes. The farmer realized that this moment was not just about gratitude or reward. It was about creating a life of partnership and trust. The young woman shared stories of her tribe, the traditions she had learned, and the skills she could offer. The farmer listened, eager to learn and to understand. Night fell and the stars appeared above, bright and steady. The farmer felt a sense of peace he had not known for years. His life, once quiet and lonely, had been transformed by a series of choices guided by courage, kindness, and understanding. The boy he had saved, the chief, and now this young woman had all become part of a story larger than himself. He understood that life was richer when shared, when guided by respect and trust. In the days that followed, the farmer and the young woman worked together on the farm. She learned his routines, shared her skills, and brought new energy and perspective to the land. The animals responded to her calm presence, and the fields seemed more alive under their combined care. The farmer realized that the act of choosing with thought and respect had created not only a partnership, but also a deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose in his life. The bond between the farmer and the young woman grew slowly but steadily. They communicated through words, gestures, and shared work. They laughed together, learned from each other, and supported one another in tasks both simple and challenging. The farmer felt that his life, once marked by solitude, was now full of meaning and connection. He had acted with kindness, courage, and respect, and the rewards were far greater than he could have imagined. Through it all, the farmer never forgot the boy he had saved or the chief who had honored him. The experience had taught him that one act of courage and kindness could ripple outward, shaping lives in ways that might never be fully understood. It had shown him that choices made with care and integrity could build trust, respect, and partnership across worlds and cultures. And so, the farm became a place of harmony. The fields thrived, the animals were cared for, and the farmer's heart was no longer burdened by loneliness. The young woman brought knowledge, skill, and companionship, and together they created a life of shared purpose. The memory of the boy and the chief remained, a reminder that kindness and courage have power, and that life, even in the most isolated places, can be transformed by thoughtful, compassionate actions. The days on the farm passed with a new rhythm. The farmer was no longer alone. The young woman who had joined him brought not only companionship, but also knowledge, wisdom, and a gentle strength that complemented his own. Together, they worked the fields, cared for the animals, and maintained the fences that marked the boundaries of his land. The farm, once quiet and lonely, now felt alive with shared purpose and energy. Each morning, the farmer rose with the sun, and the young woman was already tending to the animals or preparing the small breakfast. They communicated in simple words and gestures, learning each other's habits and preferences. Though their worlds had once been very different, they found common ground in the work of daily life. Tasks that had once been solitary now became moments of cooperation and understanding. Even the smallest chores, watering plants, gathering eggs, feeding the cows, felt meaningful when done together. The animals, too, seemed to sense the change. The dog, once the farmer's sole companion, now wagged its tail in greeting toward the young woman. The chickens clucked and pecked contentedly as she moved among them, and the cows lowered their heads, grazing calmly in her presence. It was as if the farm itself acknowledged the new balance, the harmony created by respect, care, and collaboration. As the weeks passed, the farmer noticed more than the practical benefits of companionship. There was a warmth in the house that had been missing for years. Simple conversations at the fire, laughter shared over meals, and quiet evenings spent watching the stars created a sense of home and belonging. The young woman spoke little of the past, but her stories of her tribe, its customs, and its values enriched the farmer's understanding of the world beyond his fields. The farmer, in turn, shared what he knew of the land, the crops, and the routines that had kept him alive and independent for so many years. They learned from each other, teaching and listening in equal measure. The exchange of knowledge and skill created trust and respect, forming a bond that was both practical and deeply personal. Each day, the farmer felt more certain that his life, once marked by isolation, had taken a meaningful turn. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, the farmer and the young woman paused to rest. They sat on a fallen log, watching the animals move about, and spoke quietly of the future. The farmer's mind wandered back to the boy he had saved and the chief who had honored him. He realized that his life had been touched in ways he could never have imagined by a single act of kindness. That act had brought him companionship, connection, and a sense of purpose that extended far beyond the boundaries of his farm. The young woman looked at him and smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. Though words were few, the connection was clear. They both recognized that their meeting had been guided by more than chance. It had been shaped by courage, respect, and shared values. The farmer felt gratitude for the moment, knowing that the path they walked together was built on trust and understanding, not obligation or convenience. Evenings became a time of reflection and learning. The farmer would sit by the fire, listening to the young woman recount stories of her tribe's traditions, their relationship with the land, and the lessons passed down from elders. He marveled at the depth of wisdom contained in her words and realized that he had much to learn from her perspective. In turn, he shared his experiences of life on the frontier, the challenges, the triumphs, and the lessons learned through years of solitude and labor. Each story strengthened the bond between them, bridging the gap between two worlds and creating a sense of shared destiny. The boy's memory remained a guiding force in the farmer's thoughts. He often imagined how the child was growing within the tribe, learning skills and values that would serve him well. The farmer understood that his act of kindness had set a chain of events into motion, reaching far beyond the immediate moment. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures could create ripples that shaped lives in ways one could never predict. The chief's presence lingered in the farmer's mind as well. The honor and respect shown to him by the tribe reinforced the importance of integrity, courage, and compassion. He remembered the chief's words, "Courage and kindness have power." Those words became a quiet mantra, guiding the farmer's actions and decisions each day. They reminded him that living with honesty, respect, and thoughtfulness created connections that could endure across time and distance. As the seasons changed, the farm flourished. Crops grew taller, fruits ripened, and the animals thrived under careful and attentive care. The land seemed more alive than ever before, as if responding to the energy of shared purpose. The farmer and the young woman worked side by side, their cooperation creating efficiency, harmony, and joy. Even the smallest successes, harvesting vegetables, fixing a broken fence, or training a young calf, were celebrated together, reinforcing the sense of partnership that had become central to their lives. The farmer began to understand that life, though once lonely and isolated, could be rich with connection and meaning. He had discovered that true companionship was built on respect, shared effort, and understanding. The young woman was not merely a partner in work, but a partner in life, someone whose presence brought wisdom, perspective, and joy. Their shared experiences deepened their bond, and he felt a fulfillment that had been absent for decades. One day, the farmer received a visitor from the tribe. It was an elder who had heard of his actions and wished to convey gratitude and respect. The elder spoke of the boy, now growing strong and healthy, and the importance of the farmer's kindness in shaping the child's life. The farmer listened humbly, feeling a sense of connection to the larger community beyond his farm. It was a reminder that even isolated actions could have far-reaching consequences, touching lives and fostering trust. The young woman guided the farmer in understanding more of the tribe's customs and values. Together, they worked on integrating traditions, respecting the land, and maintaining harmony between the farm and the surrounding environment. The farmer realized that partnership was not just about companionship, but about collaboration, learning, and growth. Through this shared effort, they built a life that honored both their worlds. Even in moments of quiet solitude, the farmer reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the fear he had felt when finding the boy, the tension of the chief's arrival, and the responsibility of choosing a partner with care and respect. Each step had required courage and thoughtfulness, and each had created outcomes that enriched his life beyond measure. The farmer understood that life's true rewards often came not from wealth or possessions, but from integrity, compassion, and meaningful connection. The farm itself seemed transformed. The fields were fertile, the animals healthy, and the home warm with laughter, conversation, and quiet moments of reflection. What had once been a place of isolation had become a space of learning, partnership, and growth. The farmer felt grateful for the events that had unfolded, knowing that his choices had created lasting change not only for himself, but for others as well. As evening fell, the farmer and the young woman would sit together under the stars, sharing thoughts, dreams, and reflections. They spoke of the boy, of the tribe, and of the ways in which kindness and courage had shaped their lives. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding and respect. Each day ended with a quiet sense of fulfillment, the knowledge that they were building something lasting and meaningful together. Time passed, and the boy grew older, becoming a strong and capable member of his tribe. The farmer occasionally thought of him with pride and hope, knowing that his actions had helped shape the child's future. The chief's respect and the tribe's recognition reinforced the importance of integrity and compassion in everyday life. The farmer understood that his choices had far-reaching consequences, and he carried that knowledge with humility and gratitude. Life on the farm became a steady rhythm of work, learning, and connection. The farmer and the young woman faced challenges together, solved problems with patience, and celebrated successes with joy. Each day brought small lessons in cooperation, understanding, and trust. Through shared effort and mutual respect, they created a life that was richer, fuller, and more meaningful than either could have imagined alone. The farmer often reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness, saving a boy's life. That single choice had set in motion a series of events that brought connection, respect, and partnership into his once lonely life. He understood that courage, integrity, and compassion could open doors that might otherwise remain closed, creating opportunities for growth, understanding, and lasting relationships. In the quiet moments, he would watch the sun set over the hills, feeling gratitude for the farm, the animals, the young woman, and the life they were building together. The experience had taught him that life's true richness came not from possessions or solitude, but from meaningful connections, acts of kindness, and the courage to do what is right. The farmer felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that his life had been transformed by the choices he had made with heart and thoughtfulness. Even years later, the memory of the boy, the chief, and the young women who had been presented to him remained vivid in his mind. They were reminders of the power of courage, kindness, and careful choice. The farmer understood that life could be unpredictable and challenging, but when guided by respect, integrity, and compassion, it could also be full of joy, connection, and lasting impact. The farm thrived, the land was fertile, and the family they had built grew stronger with each passing day. The farmer and the young woman became a team, partners not just in survival but in life, learning from each other and building a legacy of respect, harmony, and shared purpose. The once lonely farm had become a place of life, learning, and hope, a testament to the transformative power of a single act of kindness. In the end, the farmer knew that his life had been forever changed, not by wealth or power, but by courage, compassion, and the ability to see the value in every life. The boy he had saved, the chief who honored him, and the young woman he chose had brought connection, meaning, and joy into his world. And as he looked over the fields at sunset, he understood a truth that had guided him since that fateful day. One act of kindness, done with courage and heart, can change lives forever.